for being here.
Anything else?
But I don't think party doing it next month. Normally I know.
I'm logging in, Eric, as soon as I get in there.
Yes, sir.
That's it's very well represented. It's really.
Okay, so just a quick funny thing, we're not recorded yet.
We are recording.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is 6:30 in Readfield, Maine. Please stand and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation under God,
with
indivisible.
liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone here and listening on Zoom. We appreciate you joining us, and we appreciate your flexibility as the weather and Mother Nature brought us a new date for this meeting. So thank you to everyone who is here. We have our owl going, and we have all of our pieces. Select Board Member Carol Dortvoss is zooming in, just so everyone knows, and we're still waiting on Steve DeAngelis as well. So other than that, we'd like to go ahead and begin our meeting. 23070 are the minutes from the Select Board meeting of January 9th, 2023. Were there any additions, questions, comments about those minutes?
No, I would make a motion to approve the minutes of January 9th.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of January 9th. Is there any discussion? In person, all in favor? Excellent. And Carol?
In favor.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You just have to audibly do it too. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Excellent. Our next item is warrants 29 through 30, item 23071. I wonder, is this, Carol, is this you? Okay.
It is, and you know what? I have the wrong one with me. I can look at it real quick. I had 27 and 28, which was the last meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I had notes from the previous, sorry about that, guys.
No
So,
worries. Yeah. In the packet, if you are keeping score at home, the packet is page 9 and 10. 9 and 10.
thank you. So there's warrant 29 in the amount of and $5,260.09, which that's what I probably had notes on, and I'll go there in just a moment. Well, I can go there now, sorry. I'm going to skip that part this week, guys. I don't want to take up the time. Oh, I think one thing that was interesting, I know we've talked about this in the past, and we did have this dollar amount of the KV Humane Society. I know we've talked about it as a group before of how much we give the Humane Society, and we didn't know what that amount was, but it was on this warrant. So of interest, it's $1,162 in this one installment, which is a nice handy amount. So that was interesting to see that and have a number we can look at. And I know that's one that I had some interest in, just because we've talked about it. We were not sure what that was. So I apologize. I don't have the others written down. 29A was state fees in the amount of $4,562. 29B were more state fees in the amount of $5,435.50. And then warrant 30 was basically payroll, $21,633.70. All grand totaling $126,893.79.
Thank you very much, Carol.
I'll move that.
Second, it's been moved and seconded to approve warrants 29 and 30 for for the total amount of $126,893.79. Aaron.
I just want to thank Carol for her very careful review. She did find an error. We shorted CMP $20. And so Carol found that for us, and so that's been corrected.
Excellent.
So
I have two things. One is a question, Eric. Anderson Bank for 11,185. Was that paying a loan payment?
that would be, yeah, a lease payment. I think that's for the compactor, but it could also be for the backhoe. I'm not sure which one that's for.
Okay.
It's a capital lease payment.
And then we made payment for something that you mentioned at our last meeting to Cushing Construction for $38,060, which was storm damage repair from the storm just before Christmas.
Yep.
Right. And you had a meeting with Kennebec Valley EMA.
Well, actually, two meetings, one with Casey EMA, and then where we found that we were going to be pursuing a relief request from the state and the federal government ultimately. And a few days later, I did have a meeting with representatives from FEMA to do the full assessment and to get all that documentation in order, so that if we do have a declaration, which I'm hopeful and expecting that we will, we'll get reimbursed for the majority of those expenses.
That would be great. Thank you.
Excellent. The motion on the floor is to approve warrants 29 and 30. Is there any further discussion? All present? Carol?
Affirmative.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And we move on. We have 15 minutes set aside for communications. The first up is select board communications. Are there any members of the select board that would like to address the public?
I
I
have,
guess I just say that the sidewalk has been taken care of really nicely this year, so a big shout out to Ben and to Matt. I think Ben's the primary driver, so thank you.
Go ahead, Carol.
just one thing, I've been talking to people about, have you taken the comprehensive plan survey? And I think it's important to get as many, as much input from cross-section of the town as possible. And a lot of them are like, what are you talking about? Despite all of our efforts. So I had two suggestions brought to me by other people. One was that one person said, I thought she lived in Readfield, but she lives right across the line, said that Fayette puts big announcements like that on their fire station or on one of the big signs in the town of Fayette. So I'm wondering if at the fire station, if there's nothing about fire danger, if we might be able to say, take the comprehensive plan survey. And just that's something that will remind people daily. And also it's really very difficult to find on the town website. So I was wondering, I think right now when you open the home page, the first thing is, don't forget to get your dog tags. The expiration date is coming up into this month. I think we've had a lot of reminders of that. I'm wondering if number one can be, please take the comprehensive plan survey and provide the link right there. That would be really helpful. I was kind of disappointed when last week we said there was 100 respondents of the long one, which I think we can do much better than that. I would like just a whole lot of diverse input as possible.
Great. Anyone else? Thank you very much. All right. We move on now to item boards, committees, commissions, and departments. We have 5 minutes for this. We did receive committee minutes from the Age Friendly Committee, as well as the Cemetery Committee. And we just like to say thank you very much for sending those along. Anyone? Excellent. This is the portion of the meeting where we open up to public communication. Members of the public may address the select board. Is there anyone in person who would like to address the select board now? Please, right up here, Mr. Harris, if you don't mind, you know this dance. Just say your name, where you live.
Bob Harris, 53 Cove Road, Readfield. And a couple of weeks I got an email about someone who knew us on the Historical Society. And one of the there's somebody from another town emailed They wanted to know, if they could go on the fairgrounds and look for, with a metal detector, look for old coins and this and that and all this stuff. And I said, so we don't own the fairgrounds. So,
Yeah.
as far as I know, the town, I don't know if they have any rules, regulations as far as that's concerned about public land. And I think, so I just said, well, you're gonna have to check with the town.
Yeah.
I don't know if they check with the town or not. I couldn't, I said, as far as I'm concerned, it didn't make any difference to me.
Sure. Sure. Well, that, I would wonder, that's probably an Eric thing. Eric, if
Yeah.
someone contacts, said, hey, let me do this.
Yeah, well, at this time of year, I'd say good luck.
It's not true. It's not true.
It's my thing is like, no, Bob and I did have discussed it a little bit, and I think it's a great point to be discussed perhaps with the open space plan, because we don't really have a policy. When people ask me, I say, you know, we don't have a policy, but our request is that you not make a mess.
Mm.
That if you find anything, that you turn it over to the town of any significance, any value, any historical value. Really, there's no policy in place. We've had requests for the fairgrounds, the beach. We've had people request to do it at Millstream. We've had people request to do it at the town farm forest. So we have a lot of historic sites and resources that are part of our inventory of public lands. And I think that we definitely should have a policy on treasure hunting.
I think that's sort of where we're, a good thing, perfect timing, I guess, really is what I'm trying to say. So thank you very much, Bob.
That's all I have to say.
Appreciate it.
If I get another call, Ned, just for them.
Please, Mr. Dyer,
Sounds good, thanks.
thank you very much, Bob.
Public in general is allowed on town property, it's not just people from Readfield.
Yeah.
I mean, it's open to all, private property is not. I would hope that if someone found something personal, they would try to help locate its owner, but otherwise people pick stuff up, including trash.
Oh, right.
And they put them in the trash cans that have been stored for the winter.
Is there any public online via Zoom that would like to have an opportunity to speak? You can do that now if you unmute. All right, well, seeing none, we will move to our next item, which are appointments, reappointments, and resignations. Our appointment is 23072. Consider the appointment of Robert Bitar to the Age Friendly Committee.
I would make a motion that we do not appoint for this position.
I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and second to recommend do not approve this appointment for the Age Friendly Committee. Is there any discussion on this?
I would like to make a comment.
Sure, go right ahead, Karen.
Is Bob there to speak on his own behalf at all, or no?
No.
I guess I'm of the thought that I would almost welcome anybody to volunteer for one of our committees. He's got longevity in the town. I think he's aged with our population. I think he's had the restaurant, I'm not sure of the years, 40 years or something. And I would like a diverse opinion on our committees, which I believe he has. I don't know. I just think anybody involving themselves in the town is probably a good thing. And I think he's very creative. I think this would be, obviously he wants to be involved in the town. I think this would be a safe place, so to speak, where he may not have a conflict of interest, where some in the past maybe have been. So I guess that's my take, is why not?
Is there any other discussion about this? I hear that, but there is a bit of a conflict inside of me that someone that seems to deride Readfield at every moment now wants to help. I also find the application was incomplete in my eyes, and simply just because of age, I don't think is a solid reason enough to want to join this. So the motion on the floor is to not approve this appointment. An affirmative vote would allow this appointment to be voted down and not considered. So I just want to remind that that's what's on the floor now. Go ahead, Eric.
Thanks, Dennis. There's one reason, Carol, why not, would be that Bob's been arrested 3 times for violating conditions of his bail and a protection from harassment order against me. His bail conditions prohibit him from having communication with me. It is very important that I be able to communicate with members of the boards and committees effectively. Age friendly, we just expanded Neighbors Driving Neighbors to the town of Readfield, and I played a significant part in working with the committees to make that happen, this committee particularly. And the fact that Bob has a prohibition from communicating with me with very good reason, I think is a very good reason not to appoint him to this committee.
Thank you, Eric. Anything else? All right. If there's no more discussion, all in favor of not approving this appointment, raise your hand. Thank you. Carol? You are muted.
I'll do in the affirmative. That's a hard one.
Thank you. You got it. Very well, this appointment is not granted. We move on to our next item of business, which I have suddenly lost the. There we go. Oh, yes, of course. Tonight, we're here to have a public hearing about open space planning in Readfield. We have dedicated 30 minutes to this particular item. And basically, we have opened this up to talk a little bit about some things in terms of open space in Readfield, like treasure hunting. And we've invited folks to join us here this evening. Eric, if you want to sort of go through some of the nuts and bolts of this, I would welcome that.
Sure. Well, I think it's very exciting that the town of Readfield is taking such a proactive approach to open space issues. We have some very dedicated committees that work very hard in many different areas of open space, whether it's conservation or recreation, both passive and active. We have a wealth of resources in our community, many of which have already been protected. We have, I think, pretty soon after the most recent acquisition by a nonprofit goes through, over 1,000 acres of conserved land in the town of Readfield. And that is an accomplishment. It includes a lot of acreage owned by the town of Readfield, but also a lot owned and managed through easements by other groups. So over the past few years, we've seen that the community has a growing interest in managing those resources actively. In 2006, an open space plan was put together that set kind of some of the framework for how we can look at these type of issues and how to manage public open space land, whether it's private or public ownership. And that plan is in need of updating. The Conservation Commission recognizes that. I think the Select Board has recognized that and decided to take a leadership role in moving forward with setting up a process so that we can revise that plan and talk broadly about how open space is to be managed in the town of Readfield and what it looks like. Because the plan in 2006, a lot has changed. The acreage has increased, the number of partners has increased. And I think the public interest has also increased as we've gone through the pandemic, and people certainly have a greater appreciation for the outdoors and being in it. So the hope with this workshop is that we would be able to have different boards and committees we can communicate some of their interests, some of their intentions, some of the desires for open space in the town of Readfield. And I hope we can come out of this kind of workshop with a real basic framework of how we want to proceed, what some of the roles might look like. I think that Bob, when I talked to him earlier, mentioned that the Historical Society didn't necessarily have a big role, and I said, well, of course you do. A lot of our lands are historic lands. The area behind the Jesse Lee Church was an old muster ground. That's kind of an open question about what happens to that parcel. We also have, the fairgrounds, incredibly historic property, and the discussion about open space, and treasure hunting, which I think has some relevance. So I just think it's really important to look at this very broadly. We've seen a lot of feedback from the comprehensive plan process that says that there is a diversity of opinions. There are diversity of opinions on this. And I'm just excited that we can start moving forward with this and kind of revise and review where we are and set a new direction. Again, hopefully taking an active role after the comp plan is finished, which is the current big lift. So that's my piece, and I'll leave it there.
Excellent. And do we want to this is a sort of like a open space planning, public hearing, invite folks up to speak. If you come up here, the owl can get you. That's kind of the way we want to
That's
do
the
it.
way to go. People have the podium and I will catch them.
I'm gonna be that guy, but I'm gonna give you just a little bit of time just to make sure it doesn't go off the rails, just to honor the agenda. We have 30 minutes set aside for this, so if that's okay with everyone, who would like to be our first person to come up and speak with us?
Eric, I have a question while we're waiting for that person to
Muster the courage.
identify themselves as being number one. Where can I find the fairgrounds management plan on the website?
Oh, boy.
I know it's in something that I wasn't familiar
I
with.
think it's under the Parks and Rec, and then there's a fairgrounds page.
Okay, thank you.
But it might also be under conservation, but I expect, I know it's up under the Parks and Rec someplace, yeah.
Go right ahead, sir. Yeah, buddy. Da-da-da-da.
This question though, is this time for us?
Yes.
Did it fall down or something?
Yes, shot. Did you guys put it up? Is that what it was? Yeah.
We'll put it down in the office.
I like that. As a side note, yeah.
My name is Ben Rodriguez. I'm the sexton and I'm here. I also see Grace is with us with the cemetery committee. And as Eric mentioned, with the plan having been made in like 2006, I imagine that there are many things that weren't thought of back then and may come to mind and be a possibility. One of these ideas for open space could be in thinking about future needs for cemetery purposes for the town. We could look into options of conservational burial grounds or green burial grounds. Examples being close by in Fayette, run by the Kennebec Land Trust, being the Baldwin Hill Conservational Burial Ground. And they could be spaces for us to remember those that have lived in this town and have since passed, and be a space for being in nature, having walking trails and whatnot. But it could be an option to, in addition to conserving land, be remembrances for those that have come before us. I do have some really basic information if there's anybody interested in looking into some of the details behind conservation of burial grounds / green burial grounds. And yeah, just something that I'd like to bring to people's attention, because of course acquiring land and whatnot would take quite a bit of time. And it may be something that people haven't heard of before, but can be a different way for us to remember those that have come before us and have a more natural way of remembering and being in open spaces and whatnot. So just thought I'd put that out there for those of you interested.
I think that's a cool thing. Absolutely. I've been there.
And that's it.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Absolutely. Plenty of time. Carol, at any moment, if you have something to say, just unmute and let us know. I'm switching back and forth between a couple different screens, so please, and that goes for anyone on Zoom. Just be aware of that. If anybody else here would like to take the podium, it awaits you eagerly. Hello, over here.
Anita Coombs from Sadie Dunn Road. I am capable of remembering my address. I didn't remember. I'm on the Conservation Commission and I have a farming background. So one thing that vis-a-vis the open space plan that I see is of concern to me is that scenic vistas, which are usually over hayfields or cornfields or whatever, are all left up to the private landowners. And the 2006 open space plan comments that that's fraught with peril. And you can see that it's, if you go up to the corner of Plug Road and say that, you can see that the scenic vista that was there in 2006 does not exist in anything near the same way. There's still good views from certain places, but the view of Maranacook Lake is now a view of pine trees because they've grown up. Which pine trees do, I understand that. So that's one thing that I would like to be discussing as we go forward.
And I'm just listening, I'm taking notes on this, so I'm just listing this as scenic vistas.
Is
And
it-
it's related to the plan, I've read that in that.
Another point is the importance of open space for ecological diversity. And I see with the town-owned land that I've come across with the Conservation Commission. Town-owned land is all woodland. There's no mixed brush, there's no grasslands in town-owned land. And when you talk about ecological diversity, Bambi doesn't live in the forest. Bambi lives on edges. In fact, they live in my backyard, which is why my lilac trees look like this. Anyway, so that would be another thing to consider, is looking for more, well, to actually expand the diversity of the types of properties and ecosystems that we gain, either by altering existing ones or acquiring others. My 2 points.
Excellent, thank you very much. Didn't even use the clock, everyone's being so good. Who Nick? Come on up, Hannah. Absolutely,
Do they have to come up, Dennis?
yes.
Well, I mean, they can't just sit here, they have
Yeah.
to participate.
Well, the owl is gonna, yeah, yeah.
Hannah Flannery, I am the president of chief person of the committee.
Where do you live?
Where do I live? On Park Road.
You guys really did bring it in. Oh, my.
I'm gonna first apologize because I've not done a lot of research on the open space plan, but I will put the direct, voice forward, view forward, let's put it that way, that while open space to, many is just open land, it also can, give us space to have developed other things. It's not that we consider. So that those resources are also available to.
Thank you very much. Shouldn't have to tell you what the deal is, but whenever you go, if there's anyone on the line who'd like to speak, now's the opportunity, if you'd like to try that.
Mr. Harris, do you want to tell us how the Historical Society might be involved in this?
Oh, wow. Wow. Maybe they can stay there when they're accosted. I mean, that's, voluntarily friendly. Well, thank you. You can come on up. That's okay. Come on up here. Come on up here so the owl can see you.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
I did. Great. As far as the open space plan and the Readfield Historical Society. it's very. I think a lot of it. There was no history in Readfield unless it was written down in settings. And it's, they cleared the land and they all, that was a lot of open spaces then there. And now it's all starting to grow back. It's just gonna be effectively the Indians had it back. Before we arrived, 17, what was it, 1765 or so in Readfield. And they start cutting down the trees, they develop Readfield, Readfield started to grow back in, all the trees again, and slowly. But as far as the open space plan, open concept, is it open concept or open space?
Open space.
Open space.
Open space just means that it's not commercially or residentially developed. So that leaves everything else. When we were talking about this, 2 meetings ago, I don't remember. Every meeting, there we go. Okay, thanks, Sean. Just thinking about revamping the plan, revising it, we're not gonna rewrite it, but just to update it. The people in your organization, especially maybe Dale,
Yeah.
would be useful to have some input of, well, here are some very historic properties. you know,
Right, yes.
And we would really rather not see them become a X, Y, or Z. We would rather they remain more accessible to people. Or, this is of particular significance. I know you've done all of those historical plaques on
Yeah.
buildings,
Yeah,
which isn't really open space, but it is making the presence of the history of Readfield known to everyone who drives through our town, especially those of us who live in it. And so the thought was to bring in as many diverse viewpoints to this, so that at least you folks would have a chance to read through it and hear some of the discussion. So then you could say, oh, this is where we could fit in, or we have something about this aspect of this one piece.
right. Oh, that's true, yeah.
That's someone very important.
Yeah, a lot of beats there. Thank you.
It's something to think of. I thought I wasn't ready for anything, but I just,
No.
Actually,
I was figuring that you guys. The 10-year plan, I figured. Yes, we'll take care of itself, so we'll just sit back and kind of see how everything. And in 50 years, we can write a history.
There you go. Thank you.
All right, sorry about that.
No, not at all, not at all. I know
So
we have, yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Jerry, come on up. Yes, trails. I know we have some trails. We'll do that in just a little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm Gary Bly. I don't live on one of those roads.
Where is it?
I'm a member of the Conservation Commission, really just sort of speaking as a resident. And I had a little time to review the 2006 plan. And I think it would be really helpful for people to look at that in a variety of ways. One is there's been some tremendous open space protection in town since that time. So the baseline has changed quite significantly since that time. A number of the key recommendations in there have been implemented. Just one that comes to mind is creation of the Trails Committee and setting up a really structured network of trails in town, things like that. And I think it's also worth looking at to see what's not useful in what we did before, and how we can target it in a way that will really be most effective in terms of guiding actions ahead. And I have some ideas. I may have some more ideas on that in particular, but I just think it's worth for others. I mean, the inventory information that's in there is really great. The prime agricultural soils haven't changed really since 2006, and did the scenic views inventory and some stuff like that. But I think it's really an open question how best to make this the most effective plan that it can be.
Thank you, Jared.
Jared, do you, I mean, you were involved with this act for the first time, right?
Yeah.
Do you see a value in having some consultant support for this, knowing the structure and the effort that went into the first round? We found it helpful with other projects, so I'm just wondering if that's something we should be looking at and budgeting for.
I think so. Again, not necessarily to do the same things that were done before, but you know, I say that somewhat generically that, you know, people are so busy and expecting volunteers to make it all happen without some support is always a challenge. And so I do think exactly what sort of person and how best to focus that, I can't say, but I would say yes.
Okay, yeah, and well, follow up. Do you think that the Conservation Commission will be interested in continuing on with that role as you did the first time of working on that inventory and updating that inventory? Or do you think that might be better suited to some other group or some other effort or process?
Yeah, I mean, I think a multifaceted, effort is definitely called for here. I mean, if the conservation isn't willing to take a leading role in this, then why are we having the Conservation Commission, right?
I think Eric's more specific question though is on the inventory,
An inventory?
right on it, the inventory of not just open space, but all the town-owned properties, so we can get all of that. You know, you mentioned it was in there, but it needs to be updated, and so that's a specific thing that we need someone to do, and if that's something we need to hire for, that's fine.
Yeah, that information is much more readily available than it was back in 2006. So a good example would be the beginning with habitat information provided by Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, which is exceptional data. I think it will be key to have some support with GIS mapping skills here, because I don't think the Conservation Commission brings that skill set forward. I know I don't. So and so I think that in part maybe at least one piece of higher help here, because that's the way you do things these days.
Well, we've been finding that with the comprehensive plan, it's been difficult, as you mentioned, to get people to be involved enough to make it happen on the timetable that we really need it to happen on, with the expertise that we need. And so we've ended up relying a lot more on the consultant, which is Katie Cog,
Yes.
than we had thought we would. And so I think it's a really valid question, and it's budget season, so this is the time this board needs to be saying, okay, we've heard from people that we're probably not gonna get it done on our own, so let's find some help. And then what does that entail?
So I would say it does entail that. And happy to help think that through with you, as I know the mapping part is absolutely one piece of it. You know, the writing is always helpful. There's less planning consultants out there these days than there used to be, I think. So they're not as easy to find, but I'm sure there's some good ones out there.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah. All right, I think we haven't heard from crayons.
Anyone here?
Oh, is there ever?
No, there really isn't, because we haven't discussed this at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
No worries. Yeah,
that's
oh, yeah, it's okay.
Best thoughts,
That's all
sometimes
right.
I like it small,
Yeah.
sometimes like I nailed Bob.
Yeah. But it was a gentler.
I'm Jackie Bruin on the Trails Committee, and I live on Hog Road.
Yeah, it'll be noted in the minutes, so thank you. Go ahead, Jack.
So the only thing I would say is that, of course, we want open space and we want trails wherever wherever they're needed and wanted, and with limited help, it's hard to do a lot of work. So we, you know, we have a hard time keeping up with the trails that we have, so I'm sure we would all like to expand the trails, but there's only so much we can do. So, and we're all, most of us are older.
You said you're
Want to point out that Ben's probably the youngest one in the group.
He is now. Thank you very much. Yeah, we appreciate that. I think it's important. There's a really great resource that I just posted on the Facebook page for the town. It's a slideshow from 2017 from Maine Revenue Services, but it does give a nice, an interesting overview of a lot of sort of open space and what qualifies, things of that nature. It's available at maine.gov under revenue services, but it's dated 2017, but it sort of gives a really, it just sort of explains in a little bit more in depth of what Catherine was saying about what is open space and what are different ways that open space can be preserved and used and stuff like that. And it'll be on the Facebook page of the town of Readfield.
I think, well, Bruce, you haven't spoken. Do you want to say anything? You're good.
I'm fine.
Okay.
He doesn't live.
That's right. We're saying
Show, but.
no, go.
But we did ask people to come and to join us on Zoom, and someone else has joined us.
That's a gentleman from Consolidated.
Elaine's, I think, getting ready. to speak.
Oh, it's Elaine. Oh, okay, gotcha. Oh, I see. There's some activity. Okay.
Bloody Lane.
You want to, Elaine, are you prepared to speak with us? You
She's
are
on mute. Yeah.
Yeah, we will. There we go.
Okay. All right. So first, I would like to say that on behalf of the Age Friendly Committee, we really appreciate being included in this discussion. And the only thing to add to what's already been said is that as we go through the planning process, developing uses for open space, whether it be recreational use, trails and things like that, that we just keep accessibility in mind as a consideration.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm happy to be included in that working committee.
Well, thank you, Elaine.
Thanks.
Very much. We have heard now from the Age Friendly Committee, Trails Committee, Rec, Conservation, and Cemetery, and Historical. Is there anyone else?
I'm not sure if Grace wants to say anything or she just giving in.
Grace is a regular.
Grace is a regular, but obviously, Grace, if you would like to speak, certainly could have, you don't even have to show us your video. If you want to just speak up, you could, or either way, I just want to make sure everyone feels like they're included. That's the purpose of this. Chip, would you like to speak?
I would.
We'll come on up here to the big wooden box.
I hadn't planned on this, but
Well, hey, I'm sure you're an off the cuff guy. Yeah, thank you.
yeah. I'd like you to think about, when you think about open space, not developed, undeveloped, forest, whatever. Open space is where people can get access to, people, animals, whatever. And one thing I'd like you to keep in mind is you have different parts of the comp plan. And this is one part of it. But in that also is how we develop, how we go into the next generation with Readfield. And right now, I've been here for a couple of years now, I've learned a little bit. There is, some certain people, and I've worked very much with the KV cog person. It's interesting you say, should we hire more consultants? Well, they come in here, they find the people to talk to here, they have the people here to talk to, and pretty much the meat comes from people right here. So I think we've got to figure out how to make more involvement in the community, whether it's a stipend or whether it's organizing, say, high school juniors and seniors into projects, for continuing education, whatever. But I want to make you aware that there's quite a bit of property up on Sturdivant Hill between there and Wayne. There's quite a bit of property that's just been opened up over, on Carlton Pond. And there's quite a bit of property all over the place that really, I think and there's access there. the snowmobile trails really link up a big part of our town here. Find a way to utilize maybe a resource like that to create access. And if you can do that, let's get a plan in with the, the areas, how to get there, what to do. And I think that would encourage a lot of traffic into Readfield for people coming in the summertime or the wintertime to get around, to see places. And I always thought it was quite clever how the snowmobile trails usually end up in a place like the Weather Vane or downtown or something. You can lead people, to places where you want them to be. I think it's really important. So point is that be aware of all the different places that are really open there. I've had the consultants from up in Sturdivant, huge area. I can't tell you right now how many acres, could be hundreds or whatever, but they're looking at putting that into some kind of, conservancy. And they're, they'll be looking for ideas and everything. So do you want to make it fields? Do you want to keep it natural? It's open, whatever. So, involve all the different departments here. Ben sees all the places that are open.
Yeah.
Find your, the places that are there and how we get to them, and then get the information out, because there's a lot of open spaces here. I came from a town where open spaces, was when the development went in, they left half an acre open for a playground or something. Oh, that's the way it is in a lot of the developed part of this country.
Yeah.
We're blessed here to have a lot of open space, so
Amen.
identify it, find access to it, and find a way to get people there, and I think that will help out a lot.
Thank you very much, Chip. Appreciate it. We have about 5 minutes left of our 30. And if you would like to go for it, Catherine, that's fine.
Well, since I was on Zoom last time we talked about this,
Yes,
I made
yeah.
my motion. I just wanted to say a couple of things in person, which, that there's a history to why we're doing this. It's not just open space, but one of the charges of the select board is to make sure that policies and ordinances are updated regularly. I should revise that. They're reviewed and updated if needed. And so you might read through something, you say, yep, this hits everything. We don't need to revise anything. And so it might not go in as an update, but it might have a review date. It was noted. There was a select board time period, about 10 years ago or a little more, where they decided they were going to do every ordinance and policy every year. And that was overwhelming and of course died pretty rapidly because it was way too much work. And so we put things on kind of more of a schedule of doing that. And so open space is one of those that's really old. It's from 2006. So, and as Jerry said, there's been a lot of changes and a lot of more acquisitions, and just the fact that we didn't have a trails committee and now we have all these trails and people come here for trails. I mean, that's just huge. The fairgrounds plan is part of this whole process. That hasn't been changed since it was first developed. That was 1995. And you think of how old that is. It definitely needs to have a review and probably be updated. The Jesse Lee Church that Eric mentioned, we didn't even know about that until 2 or so years ago when the Methodist administration what have you, from the Kensville Church came and said, hey, we just found out that there's actually 4 acres up here and we only own a corner. It's like a quarter of an acre maybe. And we are thinking that it might be nice to have the rest of that, so we could maybe do something different. We're just thinking ahead. And we were like, really? And they had some deed research done, and that's how we found out it was an old muster ground. And it's not really listed as a town property. It's also not owned by the church, but the church kind of thought they owned that whole corner. And they found out they don't. And so there's a legal piece to this about how do you change the status legally so that the deeds are correct. But this happened like 200 years ago. And so the town. And it's a muster ground. It's a place to practice we're going to war, because that's what we were doing back then, like the Revolution and the Civil War. And they used it and then it stopped being used and now it's just all woods. And so that's another piece of, there may be something else that we don't know about. And that's kind of where I was coming in maybe with the Historical Society.
Mary Mason, great grandfather a cannon exploded on that muster ground, 1805, we lost his mind. So,
How many grades? Like 5 or 6?
I was sitting there, 1805, way back.
Wow.
Say over 200. And so I don't want, I'm not being here and able to, see people's reactions and so on. I didn't want anybody to think that we're like picking on open space or we're trying to pull any sort of a quickie. It's just something that's come up and it's time. And so we thought what better way to get this started than to have everybody come together, which is why we had tonight's meeting. So that we would all be on the same page moving forward. And as we talked about it more, we figured out that this really needs to come after the comp plan is finished, which is being done this spring, right? Late winter and spring. So we'll either have approval or not in June. And at that point, we thought it would be nice if all of these groups that are here and a few others who aren't, we're already thinking about, okay, come July, it's time for us to get going on this open space thing. And if we need a consultant, let's have one already lined up. That's after July, that works. But let's get it in works. And if people have time to think about it and to plan, like Jackie said, we haven't even talked about it. Well, now you have a bunch of meetings that you can say, we need to be thinking about this, and maybe we should look over the open space plan and what's in it that is or isn't relevant. And not only maybe things that weren't useful, but what about things that were useful but didn't happen? And that's, what's in the comp plan review as well. And so we, the select board, I think, we're all just really excited to have everybody put together their little piece. Nobody has to do the whole job. And then we can, kind of help to guide that process and approve it when you guys are finished with it. If that's comfortable for people, that's where we're headed.
Yes, excellent. Sean, go right ahead.
I'll be quick, timekeeper.
We actually
Yeah.
have till 7:25.
Well, it's my time.
And then I would like to make a comment before we run out of time also. I've had my hand
You
up
got it.
a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sean Keegan, City Dunroad. I just want to say, for me, a big part of this too is we just went through a period of time where open space was like the best thing ever. To have an opportunity to be out in the open, to have space to spread out, to still do things. And I think what's been really cool is even since we're trying to move out of that and we get a little bit closer, some of those ideas for open space have continued, some new hobbies that people have had for outdoor recreation. Whether it's different forms of farming, whether it's, different, there's a snowmobile trail up north that now has those like igloos with a pop-up coffee shop now, which I can't wait to try and find it. But nobody would have thought of that prior to COVID, that you would go somewhere cold and just sit inside a greenhouse. So there's just, I think people are really thinking a lot more about ways to use the space, and I'm glad that we have such a diverse group of boards that we can pull that information from.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean. Carol, I'm sorry. I thought you were clapping that little thing. I didn't realize you had your hand up, so I apologize if you've been trying to get in there. I apologize.
You go ahead,
Please,
Dennis, and then I will. That's fine. Go ahead.
Oh, no, it's all you.
Okay, sorry. So on a number of things. So when I first joined the select board, the term open space was coming up a lot, and I kind of was saying, what is that? What is that? It was kind of unknown to me. And I am thankful for the discussion last week that kind of showed its history, starting with a grant from Ella Bean. My only thing is we are now using taxpayer dollars to purchase open space. And I was doing research last weekend after the discussion last week, and I said, how much open space does Readfield have? I went on the town website. We have 2 pages that list trails, that list protected area, recreation areas, so on and so forth. I think there was like 23 recreational and open spaces in the town. We have been blessed with a lot of families that donated their property to the town. And we're very fortunate and very thankful for that. And I'm not anti-nature by any means. I love the rural character of Readfield. And so I totaled up the acres because it did have it listed on the town website. And the ones that had the acreages totaled, including Carlton Pond and Readfield, was 566 with the maximum, was awesome. Is 2,400 acres are protected, like now. And I was like, okay, what's the population of Readfield? It's like a little bit over 2,500. So that's almost an acre for every man, woman, and child in Readfield that we're fortunate enough to have protected. And I guess 19,800 acres in Readfield are the total area of Readfield. And that's about 12% of the town is already protected property that we can enjoy. That is the Trails Committee. The trails are well kept. They're a lot of fun. My only thing is using taxpayer dollars. I know there was a smaller amount in years past that is now increased. And I don't recall a discussion. I don't recall a vote. I know they said that was on the last warrant, but it was lumped in with other things. I don't mind, in my opinion, if we spend tax dollars, it should be going to benefit somebody, whether it's the elderly, whether it's the kids, whether it's music, whether it's arts. I guess using taxpayer dollars to set aside property when we are already so fortunate, and that total does not include our 8 cemeteries. I did not know Readfield had 8 cemeteries. I could maybe list 3 or 4, but it has 8 listed on our town website. And the acreages of those were not listed. So it's well over 2,400 acres that we're already fortunate to be able to have access to. And they're continuing to do stuff like the Carlton Pond Trail that's new. My only thing is if taxpayer dollars are going to do something with that property, I would be for that if it goes to benefit something. I guess I'm in these times when, and I used to say, senior citizens on a fixed income, we're all on fixed incomes. We all have only so much coming in. We all have only so much going out. I would like to be budget neutral. And I just didn't like that increase from 20,000 per year to 50,000 per year without some town discussion. I thought that was a little bit, I was a bit shocked by that. Also, I know Catherine brought up the Jesse Lee Church. On the old comprehensive plan, there is a reference to encourage the appreciation and use of historic sites such as a Union Meeting House and Jesse Lee Church. And Jesse Lee Church is protected historically, even nationally, not just locally or regionally. And the one thing we noticed, we had a service this summer. The elderly park along that street and they open their doors and they get out into that street where people are coming from up that hill and coming downhill as senior citizens are kind of slowly getting out of their car. And across the street from that property behind Jesse Lee Church is a cemetery where if people are parking on the road also, it might be a danger thing. So as far as like the age-friendly committee, the cemetery committee, to develop Jesse Lee for historic use or to appreciate it and its history, nothing can really be done there without bathroom facilities, without a parking lot. And I know that's something the church is looking at. The property behind that is not owned by the church, and we are gathering, there's 3 of us that want at some point to come before the town and ask possibly for also a win on the cemetery, if they might consider doing a parking lot there for the cemetery and the church, just for senior safety. I have a picture of elderly people getting out into traffic. So that's something we can look at. I just want to ask until the comprehensive plan is done and voted on, that we kind of, and I think that's the plan. And maybe, bring it to a vote about using taxpayer dollars for open space. That's my only thing. In the fairgrounds, we wanted a simple softball field and basketball court. And out of the 35 acres of the fairgrounds, the kids were asking for 5 acres. And we just, just to enjoy for kids. And that was really difficult. And just kept building and building of what it was going to become and got really expensive. So as long as there's a use for some of the open space where people can use it and it can benefit somebody, that's my only thing.
Thank you, Carol. We appreciate that. Unless there is any additional information, I'd like to go ahead and just ask if possible to honor the agenda. Anyone else? This would be, I'd say, your last chance. Very well then. Thank you all, to all the different groups, everyone, for adding to this entire process. I think everybody had some really good information to say and to share, and I really appreciate that. We now move to old business, item 23062, which is to consider a revised Community Action Grant Select Board Resolution. To give a little bit of background, there is a grant for $50,000, which Readfield could get. And part of that is that in order to begin the process or to apply, we need to, as a select board, pass a resolution, which can be found on page 23 of your packet. Page 23 has the select board resolution. I trust everyone had an opportunity to take a look at it. I really like the inclusion of possible ideas there, Eric. So thank you very much for that. And we just want to, I think, leave this meeting tonight passing and approving this resolution.
I would make a motion to approve the resolution as presented in the packet.
Yeah, I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve this resolution as presented in the packet. Is there any discussion? Very well.
I have something, I'm sorry.
Yes, absolutely, Carol. Now's the time.
So there's one of the things, and it was part of our discussion last time, where it talks about town of Readfield experiences intense windstorms, rainstorms, blizzards, ice storms, drought conditions, natural hazards, seeks to better prepare for future conditions. How does that fit into, I know some of these things had to be listed in our resolution. I do see like the third one down was severe storm damage prevention, maybe like roads and ditches and culverts. Is that what we're talking about when we're talking about preparing for, I mean, and I think even somebody said, what about, you know, people's wells that dry up? I don't see that as a town, like the town's responsibility to fix some of that stuff. I mean, it's nature, and then we just saw, you know, 10 inches of snow followed by really warm temperatures and like severe rain, which that happens. I mean, the ice storm of many years ago, it happens. So I'm not sure what we're talking about besides maybe roads and ditches and the stuff about drought conditions. There's not really much we can do about that. So I don't know. It just seems very broad in some of the wording.
Sure, absolutely. If Eric, if you want to go through this and why you've included this, Steve, did you have something to add?
At some point,
Okay, yes, sir.
I'll just say that I did pull out 2 or 3 of the more, I guess, indirectly, sorry, of the more indirectly relevant pieces. So this is a version that took out 2 or 3 of the pieces from last time. I think that what's here really is just in support of those project areas that are identified at the top of the list. And so those areas were things that we discussed last time. And yeah, we just spent $38,000 on a rainstorm in the day before Christmas. And that is something that we need to prepare for. And that's all this is saying, is that regardless of the cause, those things happen, and we want to be prepared for them better.
And that's to repair town-owned assets, not people's driveways.
And there were a lot of drivers that were hurt.
Things, right. Just a really quick thing. Instead of severing the storm damage, could we have severe storm damage on the copy that we signed?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Seven.
That was
Seven is
great.
okay. Thank you. Steve, go right ahead.
I guess, Carol, one thing that I've been thinking about as I, personally, I think is important to consider is that when we talk about things like, people's wells drying out and periodic drought conditions, things like that, I think it's worth including stuff like this in here because there's some things that aren't happening for us now that, you know, are certainly happening in other parts of the country. You know, there's parts of the country where industrial agriculture or people who are using spring water or drilling wells to sell, you know, water to other for profit. Those things are things which could impact the entire town. You know, we don't have major water table issues right now, but you never know. And it just feels like it's here. We should think about, you know, building in protections for the things we have. That's my thinking about that.
And this, yeah, so Sean, Steve, that's kind of the stuff I was thinking too from that, is, you know, rain in December doesn't go into our wells. That goes down into the lake, you know, because the ground's frozen. The reason we want more snow in the winters because it settles back into our water tables and stuff. And you know, we want to be mindful of those and how it can. We have had people in town that have had to pump water from one area of the town to another because of their wells drying out. So it is real. Definitely have it.
Yeah, it also took me a while. I realized the whereas all the conditions of the sort of resolution tie into the 4 bulleted points. And I think that when I see severe or severe storm damage prevention, I also think that you know, it took me a while, and maybe, and I don't know if this is the same experience, Carol, that you had, but we do. I think it's just that particular portion, that condition relates back to the severe storm damage, making sure that we're as prepared as possible. So that's how I read it, but certainly I hope that might either help you or perhaps further perplex you.
I like the fact that we're not saying, okay, this is the one idea, this is what we're gonna spend it on, and if you guys don't like this idea, then we're not really interested in the money. We've put out several ideas of things that we recognize as issues in our town. And they gave a long list of things we could choose from. So we've narrowed it down to show that we've paid attention.
Yeah.
But then this also gives some flexibility if we do receive the grant, to get some public participation to say, you know, we think this is the most important thing to spend it on, is updating the lighting or, you know, fixing some culverts that by them breaking or not operating correctly, then down the road from that, 3 more things go wrong. So maybe you want to do the upstream things. And it just gives us flexibility.
Carol, did you want to add to that?
Just thanks, Eric. I did notice some were taken out. I appreciate that. It was a bit more palatable. If you, and we're talking about $50,000 here, and the ones that you have listed above, the energy efficiency, understood, LED lighting conversions. I think Eric said something like $20,000 for that. I didn't think something like that would cost that much, but I think the $50,000 is going to be gobbled up very fast. And I think natural disasters and storms and all that stuff is the stuff that as a town we have to respond to. And if it happens, then like what happened with the roads the other day, that's what our budget is for. I mean, if it's just that line, or if we want to take out drought conditions, I get it. I just don't know how we prepare roads, which would be our responsibility. I mean, drought conditions, I just don't see fit there. It's my only thing.
I think that was part of the verbiage in the application documents.
I don't think that was one of the ones that had to be included. There were 3 that I think Eric said had to be. I don't think that one was.
3 are the first one, and the last 2. The
Yes.
stuff in the middle is the supplemental, and so I guess if the board wanted to change that, you could by motion or however you'd like to do it.
I'm sorry, what are we voting
Are you
on?
on the bullets or on the whereases?
The third whereas, I think,
Okay,
right?
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to,
We already have a motion on the floor.
okay,
yeah, there's a motion on the floor to approve this as it is. And
She could make a motion to amend it.
yes, Carol, you could certainly make a motion to amend it if you would like to omit something.
okay, I love that. I would
But just
like,
before you do that, so.
Yeah, hang on one
so
second,
clear, Eric, which were you said there were 3 that were required there?
The first one, including the bullets, is required.
Okay.
The bullets can be changed, but that content needs to be there.
Yeah,
Okay.
And then the last 2, the others are statements that are in support of the bullets. I think that the idea is that you want to strengthen your position by saying that, you know, mentioning things that are relevant and that you find to be important. Because this is an application, this isn't a guarantee that we're gonna get the grant.
right,
You want to make a statement, but it's really up to the board, of course, how you
sure,
how you
sure,
say that.
So
And
the
so-
last 2 are the be it resolved and the be it further resolved? Is that what you're saying?
no, the last
Correct,
2
where-
whereas,
Well,
the last 2
the
conditions.
last 2 be it resolved.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, the last 2 points in the first.
Okay, so the whereases are all things that we wrote in to be supportive of the application
Except for the first one. The first whereas is necessary.
That's right.
with the
Yeah.
bullet points. Yes, thank you. I was lower than that on the screen.
Right, just to make sure we understand what we're saying, the very first section, whereas the town of Readfield with the bullet points, that is required. The be it resolved at the bottom is required, and be it further resolved are also required. What comes in between the whereas portions are editable, is what we're saying. And Carol, just to clarify for me, you would like to, how would you like to change the third whereas, please?
I would like to make a motion to amend the current resolution to remove the third whereas about windstorms, rainstorms, blizzards, drought conditions, national hazards, because I feel those where we talk about roads and ditches and culverts is the roads budget. If this is $50,000, that's going to be used up with the energy efficiency things we're looking at, which is what I think the whole goal of this grant was. The LED lighting I get and all that, but the ditches and roads, I think, is the roads budget and the roads committee. I think it's completely separate from this so that we don't
Okay.
have the spillover like we did in the rainstorm. That's what I'd like
Yeah.
to see.
So what I'm gonna do is some proceduring here, Carol, so just give me a second. There is a motion only on the floor to amend the resolution to remove the third conditional whereas, which includes information about windstorms, rainstorms, etc. Is there a second to this amendment? Hearing none, the motion will not pass. So right now, there is a motion on the floor up for discussion, which is where we are, to approve this resolution as written. So I just want to make sure everyone knows we're back to that point.
With the 1 letter added.
With the 1 letter added, yes, of course. Yes, it's pending. Yeah, no, that's it, pending the agreement. Does everyone understand? Carol, do you understand where we are?
I do.
Okay. Are there any further discussion? All in favor of approving the resolution for the $50,000? All opposed?
Opposed.
Note that Carol Dorenbos is opposed. Excellent, the motion carries. Thank you very much. We move on now to new business. We have 55 minutes set aside for these items. Item 23073 is to consider a consent agreement for map 140, lot 71. We have 10 minutes set aside for this. And Eric, this is your time to shine.
Oh, yeah, it's Chip's time to
Oh,
shine.
sorry. Chip, it's
I'm
your
gonna
time
pass
to
it right
shine.
off to him and say that this is not an unusual activity for the select board. From an administrative perspective, we have dealt with these in the past. It's a necessary and important function the select board has. but Chip's gonna talk more about what happened.
Yes, thank you, Chip. If you don't mind going to,
Okay, this has been an ongoing issue for almost a year now. From last March, when it was discovered, when I made a site visit to look at the Bellevue's property, which they had purchased and had subcontracted or contracted with some people to clear it. And when I got there, it was cleared. It was cleared way beyond what it should have been, in my opinion. And I gave well, we went through it. There was options to get it fixed and everything, but it went the long route. And I'd like to thank a couple people in the process. Elliot Thayer has been very helpful, surveyor. He's also done some of the papers that got this done. And Michael, who's up there under Archipelago. He's the legal counsel that the Bellevue's hired to work our way through this. They want to put a nice summer place over there in Maranico, over at Tallwoods. And so we went through quite a bit of back and forth, quite a few proposals. Michael really did a great job when I sent him the original consent agreement, which includes reforestation of the property. It includes limitations on how it's used. There's an easement right of way there, which was improperly being used for traffic right down to the lake shore with cars, which will no longer occur. The subdivision is got a place across the street from the Bellevue's property for parking for people that own the island, for them to come in and go out and bring their groceries and all. That was covered, putting in permanent erosion control. Unfortunately, when one of the subcontractors came in, not only did they over clear, they dumped a lot of soil and other things in there, so you couldn't even tell where the stumps were and everything, which has caused quite a bit of erosion close down to the lake. So the Bellevances were good with that. As soon as we identified that, they put in a double thing, only to be breached by the people that own the island, so they could get their cars down there, and we had to fix that. My point is, I'm not gonna go through every item, I'm not gonna assign any blame, because everybody in the long run took what they had to get this done. Which again includes reforestation, includes a paid amount of money for me to go over there and check on each part of it, make sure it's being done, make sure that the plantings are done right. We had Joe Stevenson, I should mention, he was also from Wayne, went over there and checked out the plan. So there's a bunch of things to get that land back to where it's supposed to be under DEP and Wayne ordinance. There was also a penalty that was assigned of $10,000, which you're here to approve. And I don't like to punish people, and I don't think it was punishment. I think it's paying us back for all the time and effort that went in, between myself, lawyers, previous CEO who went down there. We had a lot of people went down there. A lot of people helped me through with this. So it's, again, punishment, maybe, but it really is something that I'd like to see more of, that the activities in the CEO's office get paid for by the people that they're directed. So I think Eric provided you each with a copy of this. Michael was very helpful in getting this up to the parties up in Canada and back overnight for our meeting tonight on Monday. Oh, wait a minute, we're on Tuesday.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I've got a signed copy here. If you all find it,
Sure, Chip, is there any, Michael, is there any, anything you would want to add, anything else, et cetera? I give you that opportunity.
No, first off, thank you for having me tonight. I'm Michael Skolnick, I work with Archipelago. I'm an attorney over here, and here on behalf of Pamela and Renee Bellevue. No, I think Chip said it all. I mean, honestly, they inherited a lot of these issues. Yes, they did over clear within the buffer area on the property, and they're really just trying to fix it and move forward and have an enjoyable summer home and maybe one day future year-round home. So this is the first step to getting that done.
Great. I just want to say from my perspective, that we welcome these folks to Readfield, because I just want to say it seems like they recognize that something wasn't right, And when it came time to make something right, they took all of the necessary steps and we got to a good spot. So I think there's something to be said for that. Thank you, Chip, and thank you, everyone, and Michael, thank you as well. Is there anything else? Go for it, Catherine.
Very comprehensive agreement. I'm very impressed. Obviously, everybody put a lot of thought into this, and I think everybody made some concessions. You know, we're not overly punishing somebody for something that happened. We're just trying to make the best out of what's there. And that's the way I would like our town to be. So I'm happy that's how it looks. It does say that there's a $2,500, I just had it in front of me, but it's supposed to be held in escrow. Is that in addition to the $10,000?
Yes, it is. And again, that's to cover the
Future costs of inspection.
the major amount of money you pay me every hour to go out there and visit. It's
Okay,
to come out of that, and that is after 2 or 3 years, that goes back to them, what has not been taxed.
right. So if things get done reasonably, you won't have to be down there a whole lot. We won't use that money up just because we could.
No.
Correct? It's okay.
No,
I feel strongly about us being covered for things, but not abusing that. So
we
I'd like to see
could
it
have
get as
been,
much back.
we
as
could
we
have
can.
been much more punishing, we could have been much more taxing, but thanks to Michael, he was very big in getting this kumbaya moment, getting this right through. I did ask, one of my last asks on this was to get a hold harmless for the town. Because it wasn't the Bellevues that went out with the chainsaws, and it probably, you know, it was a lot of people, but I don't want anybody coming after the town afterwards going, well, wait a minute, measurements were wrong, this and that. So in this document, there is a hold harmless for the town from anybody that comes after this, once it's signed.
Well, I think it seems to me like it was pretty comprehensive, and if this is where we ended up right now in front of us, I feel pretty confident.
So do we need a motion for this? I would make a motion to approve the consent agreement as presented and signed by the property owners already.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve this consent agreement. Is there any further discussion? Once
If I
again, thank
can
you.
just
Go
say,
ahead, Ken.
somebody pointed this out to me on Maranacook Lake, and it was a swath, very noticeable. I'm very thankful to the owners if it preceded them. And that was my question, and the question of others is, so what happens when someone does that? You know, are they penalized so it doesn't set some kind of precedence? And now I know. So thank you all that took part in it. And to the property owners, we do welcome you.
Excellent. All in favor in person, please show your hand. Thank you very much. And Carol? Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Chip. You are all set.
And what I ask of the board is, I'm gonna leave this with Eric, you'll sign it, I need it back, we'll copy it and get it back to Michael and the Bellevues,
Okay,
and we should be done.
thank you very much. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
but it's tomorrow morning.
Thank you, folks.
Our next item is
Thank you, Steve.
23074. This is for a CMP town pole permit. They are looking to put up some poles in town, and they need to go through this process. It is in your packet on page 30. You can see there's some maps and information. Pretty normal stuff, pretty basic. But just wanted to know if anyone else had any questions, any explanations, or things that are needed for this. Eric, anything to add about this? Seems like it's pretty pro forma, normal stuff.
Yeah, there's a connection that they'd like to make, on Sadie Dunn.
They've done, hey, it's the road system.
No, that's Dunn's Corner is.
Oh,
So I have a curious question. Not because it's on roads,
Yeah.
but because of the general, just because I can think of something, is that when these happen and these changes come into place, does CMP also coordinate for the removal of the, say, an old pole and the movement of, say, cable lines?
Oh, well, so, yeah, if it's necessary,
It's necessary on this project.
yeah, well, definitely we'll find a way to bring that up to them. One thing I will say is that it depends on who owns the poles, that exist currently. If CMP doesn't own them, they might be just fine leaving those low hanging, cable wires, because that's not their concern. We've actually had issues with, well, anyway, it depends on ownership, who owns it. If CMP owns it, then they typically coordinate with other utilities to move those utilities, and they will put them as much as they can up into the appropriate strata, because the power's on top, and you got the cable, and the telephone, and all that. It's all has a hierarchy. And they do work on that, and we've had success with that in other areas, but it really depends on who owns the poles.
I was stunned on, they were, CMP came to work on my last week, and so I was talking to the foreman on the job, and since I'm always looking for telephone poles for bridges for the school trails, I said, well, when you move these wires, and you cut down the pole, can I just leave right there, and I'll get it to them. Well, we're only gonna take the top 8 feet off, sir, but this pole is owned by 3 companies, and we have done. They have some kind of ground radar that looks at the bottom of the pole, they determine the bottom of this pole is rotten. And you can't see it, but the bottom is rotten, and so we are gonna move the power line and leave the rotten pole. He didn't say that, but leave the rotten pole with the internet and seriously?
So this section does have a pole like that has, where they're talking about has a pole that's half over the road. It's leaning, and it only has the internet cable attached to it at this point.
Because they suddenly don't think it's holding it up.
Now, see, I'm gonna look at that just from the opposite viewpoint. CMP is being proactive and making sure that their power line is gonna stay up, and if we're gonna have.
Oh, I like that. I'm not complaining about that.
But that the other owners are not being.
That's my
proactive.
point.
Right, so
Yeah.
I'm happy with, I'm one of those who really like CMP. I like having power, and I'm good with that.
And I also just want to make sure, because this section of the road is actually Mount Vernon.
This section,
What they're talking about, that corner is Mount Vernon,
all of it, or just a portion?
portion of it. So I only see Readfield noted on here.
Yeah. Well, I'll coordinate with them to make sure that Mount Vernon, but if they need to get permission from Mount Vernon, they do. I'm not sure if they just photocopied the same set of poles and reached out with both towns. But
I just want to make sure we're
Yeah.
covering that.
yeah, I mean, if we sign off on something in Mount Vernon, it's null and void, and it's their problem, so, yeah. Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the CMP Power Company application as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve this agreement with Central Maine Power for a town pole permit. Is there any further discussion? In person, all in favor? Thank you very much, Carol. Thank you very much, the affirmative, thank you. Our next item, we move to item 23075. Consider a letter of support to investigate broadband internet with Fidium Fiber. We have 15 minutes assigned to this, and I also believe we have Mr. Thorne with us. In your packet, you can see that some information about Fidium Fiber is available. You can see information that relates to funding and to Readfield, etc. This seems like a different approach than what we have taken for fiber before. The town of Readfield is still committed to giving our residents the best quality service again, no matter what. And it seems like this could be a possible alternative to what we proposed last June. Eric, is there any information that you can give us above and beyond for this that would help us understand it more?
Couple quick sentences. This is an exciting opportunity. This does change significantly the approach that we took last June. So this is a real, I think, a good opportunity for us with a low initial threshold and little no initial investment, but certainly in the long term, we would need to be considering a grant match of some kind. But I do want to note that the broadband committee met last week. and had a good discussion about this for probably an hour, hour and a half. And it was unanimous, vote to recommend that the select board also move this forward. So
So the people who know have spoken.
so that happened, and I'll leave it there.
Great. Excellent. Does anybody have any discussion or information about this? We're lucky to have Mr. Thorne. Hello, Simon, you are, we could see you. I'm pretty sure we can hear you if you were to speak, but wasn't sure if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, happy to answer any kind of questions that you might have, or talk specifics, if that helps. I guess the only thing, sorry, the only thing I would add is that we have, we're being told that the next grant round is probably going to happen this summer at the earliest. I think when I had originally met with Eric and some other folks, I thought it might be as early as March, but we are being told that it is probably looking like this summer, and it may potentially roll into the fall, so.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody take a look at the proposal? It certainly seems like this, just as a side note, watching and being a part of some of the fiber discussion from its sort of very original germination. And following the meetings of the broadband committee, it does seem like this does satisfy the idea of getting fiber to the home, which was one of the original goals in the first place. When Bruce Burgoyne gave us those fiber to the home books. But I think it's obvious in there, and I love the idea that you know, the Fidium 1 gig service is the most popular, and that's fast. Anybody else have something to say?
I'm gonna keep it really brief, but just for any public that might be listening and for the record, Simon gave an excellent presentation to folks from Mount Vernon, as well as to Eric and myself here. What we're looking at now is going to be wholly owned by Fidium Fiber. Town has no ownership. This is a private company that would be coming into town and putting in the infrastructure and operating a business over it, similar to telephone lines or to cable companies. There's no franchise agreement because there's no cable involved. What we're doing here is giving a letter of support that says to Consolidated, yes, we, the town of Readfield, would like to possibly enter a partnership with you, and we'd like to do it through this grant process. And we understand that there's a requirement of a small contribution if we so choose. There's not a requirement. There's a requirement that you state whether you are willing to contribute to it or not. And the suggested amount, according to the grant application that we know about right now, and that may change as Simon alluded to, would it range anywhere for Readfield from about $21,000 to $210,000. Fidium would be putting in close to $1 million, and then the grant would pay the rest of it. So it's a grant requirement. It's not something that Fidium is requiring. We only pay that if we actually get the grant. So what it means is if we get the grant, we would be, well, when we apply for it, we have to say how much we're willing to try and put in. We've been told pretty clearly that if you don't put in the maximum that they allow, which is that about 210,000, you probably won't even be in the running for the grant. Because most towns who are going to do this are going to put in that maximum because that gives you the best ranking when they do the grant proposals. So if the town isn't willing to put in a very small amount, we probably won't get the grant. And then the other piece of this is that evidently and Simon, maybe you could just remind me what the next, because I didn't write it down. The next round of grants after this, you said Readfield probably won't qualify because they're going to change, the grant people are going to change the standard for unserved and underserved.
Yeah, so it's really a lot of to be determined. The funds that are available today would come out of the ARPA funds. And, you know, there are, as was just mentioned, there are a lot of towns who are trying to get the same funds. It's a little bit less restrictive. The BEAD funding that will follow has a lot more restrictions to it. Basically, and again, we're a year away from this, so I'm speaking as I know today. Things may change, but the way I understand it is that BEAD funding anywhere that has spectrum, which, you know, typically their speed is, you know, 100 by 20. You know, it may vary a little bit, but anything that's 100 by 20 is considered served, so it would be ineligible for BEAD funding, the way I understand the program today.
And so that's why the committee and myself and Eric and people from other towns, I know that Simon has already spoken with Mount Vernon and with Fayette. I believe you have or are going to speak with Wayne, with Jay, maybe with Livermore. The grant people are looking for us to get sort of a swath that's covered. So they will maybe look at towns who are contiguous in a more favorable light than just a town here and there spotted. And as he said, for anybody who has spectrum coverage, this is probably our last chance to get a grant because of the way it's going to change in the future. So I think it's very important that we do this now. And if we don't get the grant, we don't spend anything because the whole thing is done by Fidium because this is their project.
I have a couple questions.
Go for it, Carol.
So you said there's no fiber? Catherine, maybe I misheard.
No fiber where?
I thought you said there's no fiber involved, so that was one of the differences versus the plan previously?
So, oh, no, there's no cable. So therefore, their franchise agreements are just for cable services. And so we would not be having any sort of a contract with Fidium. Because this is a fiber only service.
So my only thought is we had a proposal. It was on the ballot. It was voted down. I was with you at 21,000, and then when we went up to 210,000, I was like, oh.
Yes, but remember that the first ballot that we had about 2 years ago was, do the people of Readfield want us to look into bringing fiber to Readfield? And that one passed with one of the biggest votes ever. Yes, please look into it. And we stated that we would not make any proposal, even though you told us we could spend $5 million, without coming back to you with a proposal for you to approve, meaning the town. And we brought that proposal to the town and the town voted it down. But that voted down that proposal. That didn't vote down the interest in broadband. So having fiber, I think, is something that's still on the table, but we know that people don't want to do it the way we proposed. And so this is a almost 180-degree different project.
I hear that. However, it's still a sizable expense. So I would suggest it's on the ballot again, because I think, is it 2% of the town don't have access, or let's not talk about underserved, but are not served? Something like that?
5%, 5 to 10%. I haven't been able to get Spectrum to actually tell me. I'm not sure they even know what their service area is. It's been a point of frustration for me that I'm trying to talk to them about, the existing cable franchise agreement. And I can't even get a list of people that are served. So we think that it's about 5%.
Okay,
But
my thought is,
sorry, in this particular round, and Simon can clarify this if we need, they're listing Readfield as all under and unserved. So because we don't have 100 over 100, is that right, Simon?
Yeah, so I think the better way to say that would be that, let me share let me share something really quickly. This may help.
Yeah, I guess if Simon made a really good presentation, maybe that's what I'm lacking to understand.
Or is everybody
what's
able to
different?
view that?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Yep.
Okay, so basically the Main Connectivity Authority, or the MCA, uses Vetro mapping to determine eligible locations. And so what that means is if I were in the system today, right now, viewing it, there would be a bunch of green dots within Readfield. And what that's saying is those particular locations are eligible for funding. It does not tell me whether they're least served, unserved, underserved, or served. That's probably very confusing. So these are their parameters. Okay, so basically with our DSL service, because Fidium is consolidated, it's a new brand because we're bringing a new product to market. Fidium is our flagship, fiber only, no copper, no cable. That's just purely a fiber network. And so we're looking for a differentiation between our old DSL and our, our Fidium product. But getting to the speed definition, right? All I see is a green dot. It says it's eligible. It does not tell me whether that green dot is a least serve, meaning they have speeds of 25.3 or less. It doesn't tell me if they're an unserved, meaning they have speeds of 100 by 20 or less, or if they're an underserved, which means it's basically, 100 by 100, under 100 by 100 to 100 by 20. Does that make sense? Because that can be a little confusing. So I just want to make sure that makes sense.
But this
So I
is
think
going
what you're
to,
saying is- Go ahead, Carol.
that's right, Catherine, go ahead.
Oh, all right. But so Readfield qualifies based on what you just explained.
Right. There are a total of 1,384 locations that they are saying would be eligible for funding. When you get down into the kind of the weeds of the grant application, right, they're going to go after the ones that are least served first. That's their guidance, right? That's what they have to do. Then they're going to go, and that would be considered category 1. Category 2 would be those folks who are unserved, second. Category 3 would be underserved, and category 4 would be served. What that means is that every aspect within that grant application has a weighted score, right? And so you get the grant application submitted, each section comes with a scoring rubric, I guess I'll call it. And so the speeds that are available within that town are weighted. Time to build is added. The addition of town funds to the overall grant score is weighted, right? So it adds to the overall scoring rubric for the town, where there are so many towns that are kind of looking at the same thing at the same time with a small amount of money to be had. I just think the towns who can put in, I guess my statement would be the town should put in as much as they can, as much as they're comfortable with. Again, it's not something that Consolidated is requiring. This is something that the MCA is putting into their grant applications. They're doing this to, as they say, show that the community has stake in the game, stake in the process. So,
Thank you. Sean?
So just use my simple thought here in math. So let's say just our regular grant application, if the town is putting $0 in, this is just me being vague, then we have 1,384 points. But if the town is putting $15 per location, we might have an additional 1,384 points. And then if we're putting $150 per location, we're going to have an extra 13,840 points. Is that how I'm reading this correct?
It's close. So
That's
if the town, if the town put in $15 per location, that gives the overall grant score 1 point. So if we had 70 points total and the town added $15 per location, which would be just over $20,000, we would add, or the MCA would add 1 point to our overall score. If the town added $207,000, then the MCA would add 10 extra points to the overall score. And I would just say that 1 point, probably sounds a little ridiculous, but we don't know who else are putting in the grant applications and what they look like. Readfield may be more favorable than the next place, or they may be even. Town A may not put any contribution in. Readfield may put that $15 per location in and win it by the 1 point, right? So that's kind of stuff that the Maine Connectivity Authority does to the side. We don't get to necessarily see that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
So if I can just say, so the town is paying for these different locations. Is there a cost also to the landowner, the property owner that's underserved or not served?
No.
Okay. So we've had an up vote, a yes vote for yes, let's do this, and a down vote for or let's not do this for a cost. So I think it'd be a little disingenuous of us, if we're thinking of this, to not have it on the ballot. It can be a big expense. I think if we're gonna do this, we are going into voting season here and budget discussions and town forums. And I think this is the time to be 100% transparent, 100% clear, 100% getting input and feedback. So I would like to say, if we are going to go down this path or are thinking or contemplating of it, that it be put on the vote.
And I'm sure that's what we would do. This letter tonight is just asking Fidium, part of Consolidated, to go ahead and determine what the cost would be and for them, for the total project, and to get back to us with that information. So then they can say, okay, here's the grant proposal that we would put together. Once those parameters are known, which Simon has said he doesn't have yet. So this is just asking Fidium to go ahead and do that engineering at zero cost to Readfield, at zero commitment from Readfield.
So it's really just sort of, would you classify it again? I'm simple, but would you just classify this as us approving this agreement or a relationship to be able to take the next step, which is still no obligation?
It's a letter of intent.
Right, so it's not, you're not committing money, and
Correct.
what is the deadline for the grant? We know
He
that yet?
doesn't know. He said it's sometime this summer,
Just sometime.
Yeah.
right, which is after we
Once
would
you
have
have
to,
to, we would have to vote on it.
Yeah.
right. Well,
And so will Gideon get back to us in time to put something on the ballot if we said, oh yeah, this is good, we should put this on the
Simon?
ballot?
So I'm not quite sure that I heard all of that. Sorry.
I just was asking, Simon, if the timeline for you, when you get back to us, when you do the research and do the engineering, right? Will we know in time to be able to put a money question on the ballot in June?
Yes, I believe you would. I anticipate. So let me back up. What this letter is doing is it allows me internally to say to my engineering team, I need some of your time, right? There's only so many resources and they're engineering other things. And I just, it's hard for me to go and say, hey, I had a conversation with the town, they'd like to work with us. Whereas the letter is something physical, I can show them and say, listen, they would like to explore this with us. I think that we would probably be looking at a March timeframe. I have engineering time set up for tomorrow to determine, how long this process would take. I have not had conversations with Jay, Livermore Falls or Livermore. If they wanted to have conversations, I'm certainly open to that, but I'm not actively knocking on doors kind of thing. So then I would take that information and as being said here, I would bring that back to the town and say, this is what it looks like. I also at that time hope to have a better definition of what each town looks like, right? I mean, it's one thing for me to say there are 1,300 points here that are eligible, but what does that really mean for a grant application, right? Is there 10% of those who actually have no service? Right, I need to understand that to help understand what that grant application looks like. So I guess my long-winded short answer is yes, I believe that you would have that information.
Simon, that's exactly what I'm looking for right there. Some comprehension of what this might mean. There is a line on the slide you just showed earlier saying the grant guidance is due sometime next spring. Does that mean from us? There was something about build would take place some point in 2024, depending on the grant guidance due sometime next spring. So does that sound like we have that much time to really say, yes, we're in?
Okay, so that's a good catch. This slide is something that I've used. So basically, what this is talking about is guidance will come out just before the grant application comes out, and that is where I'll get the information as to different things like you got added points today in the last grant round in November. You got added points if you offered gig service, symmetrical gig service. You got added points if you could build within 12 months. There were different things that you got added points for. And so that's really what that's talking about, is because I don't know when that grant application will truly come out. They're referencing this summer. That's very vague, right? I mean, it could be the last week in August and it would still qualify as summer, although you're really getting into early fall. And what's the window of that grant open? Is it 2 weeks? Is it a month? How long will it take them to work through all of the grant applications? We were informed 2 weeks ago about our grant applications that were put in November. So it did take some time. And so, I think that we would probably be looking at the 2024 year for any kind of build. So, there are a lot of unknowns that I really can't explain, but that guidance would not come out until, maybe 3 to 4 weeks or maybe 2 weeks prior to the opening of the grant application.
Okay, and my last thing is, I appreciate you saying consolidated, because I'm like, I have never heard of Fidium, but I sure have heard of consolidated, so thanks.
You're welcome.
Excellent.
It's
Thank
a
you
lot
very
like
much.
Ford Motor Company. They've got the F-150, the 250, the Mustang, right? They're all Fords. They just have a different label. That's exactly what we've got.
Thank you very much.
I would make a motion that we approve the letter as presented in the packet for Consolidated Communications.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to, I guess, accept or support the letter of support to investigate broadband internet with Fidium Fiber, aka Consolidated Communication. And is there any further discussion? All right, everyone in present. Thank you very much. And Carol?
If it's to explore, yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, it does pass. Wonderful. We move now to our next agenda item, which is 23076. Discuss draft select board procedures. Oh, thank you, Simon. Thank you.
You're welcome,
Oh,
everyone.
there you go. Yeah, excellent. We're good. Yes, we're working on it. This is do you want to extend it now? Yeah, go for it.
I make a motion to extend the meeting. It says 25 minutes, so I guess until 9 o'clock.
Thank you. All in favor? All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Carol. Go ahead, with our discussion about the draft select board procedure. This is in your packet. If you have any questions, now's the time.
So this was something that we talked about at the retreat, and I said I would work on because I've always wanted this. It's sort of like having a job description. It's not a manual of you must do this and you must say that and you must do it at this time, but it's a guideline for people to know what they're getting into before they run for select board and to use after they become a select board member. And also to be used for like an orientation, you know, like read it and then we'll talk about it kinds of things. It's a lot of procedural stuff. I did not create it. This was created by which town, Saco. And I changed all references to Saco. Eric said it is absolutely permissible, anything that's out on the internet to use like that. And it's something that towns do in Maine is they share their information with each other. And why reinvent the wheel when you can just modify it to suit your own needs? So there were things in there that I color coded, where I had questions about, you know, what is our vision? You know, do we call it this in Readfield? Is this something we do in Readfield? So in reading through that, that's kind of where I came at it from. I took out a whole bunch of stuff. I might have left in a few things that we don't actually have, but I think it just helps to explain things. And so I think where we're at was this was supposed to be kind of, everybody was supposed to have read through this at this point, and be processing it. And if we have any questions, especially in light of this being a later meeting, I think we could all come back with questions for our next meeting.
I would prefer that. Go ahead, Sean.
Just one thing I like very quickly into it. I just would like maybe some expansions on what the capital plan is, what the comprehensive plan is. I think those are, especially because of the volume of conversations we have around them, it's one line. I think it'd be good if we extrapolated what those mean a little bit
Comp
more.
plan and CIP.
Yeah, those were the two that I was thinking, I think those are bigger than.
It's almost like I don't mean to dumb it down, but it's almost like you need a bit of a glossary.
Yes.
Like a bit of a what is this? Like what, especially if you get on the board all of a sudden and then suddenly you're on the board of assessors and you're like, what just happened? What am I even doing? So those sorts of things, I think, and I have to say, without John Parent, I would absolutely be lost and not have any more of an idea of what happens in regular select board meetings. So it was because John was able to explain what we were doing and when we were doing it. So I had someone, it was just me, I was just the new guy and we sat next to each other. So that was very helpful. He would just kind of reach over and say, this is what this is, and this is what we're doing. And so it was really helpful. I one of the first things I ever said was, why isn't this in writing? Why don't we have, you know what I mean? And so I think this is also very important, and especially as we see new members coming in, and it doesn't make any sense not to have some kind of written orientation. I know that there's a bit of a manual and all that stuff, but having this, I think, is really great. So yeah, I would like to be able to come back with this.
One thing Eric did suggest when he and I were going over this, after he had read the whole thing through, thank you, Eric, for doing that.
You're welcome.
Is do we include all things in the appendix or not? And so I was like, well, if it was my choice, I would not include them. I would list them as the appendix. And then I would make sure that they are available on the website, and that when we have a new member, that they are actually sent as attachments to the new member, so they don't have to go hunting for them.
No,
But
absolutely.
to actually have them in the document, Eric agreed, was kind of cumbersome, because then if we change one of those appendices, we have to go back and change this. So by just referencing them, it leaves it a much more workable document.
Agreed. Whatever makes this more pliable and readily available for distribution should be priority.
Well, I just
Eric,
want to thank
please.
Catherine for putting this together, bringing it forward. It's going to make, a world difference, I think, for a lot of people. It certainly is going to be a lot of work with this polished. I did clean up as much as I could that you had highlighted. And there were some things that, really related more to a town with a charter than the Readfield. But it's interesting because there's actually a lot of these things are things that you might at some point codify in a charter, but for the time being are just policy discussions around how we approach certain issues. But it does delve into a lot of detail in a lot of different areas. They're important for board members to be aware of. I mean, even as a place to talk about what kind of computers we provide to the select board and how the email system works, and just things that are really helpful in a very fundamental way as far as the communication goes. And then, much more nuanced things about, how do you as a select board member communicate with individual committee members or with the town manager. So it's a broad-based document, and I think it is going to be helpful. So thanks.
So we can agree that we'll come back with anything specific.
Absolutely.
And if you guys want to email those to Eric, because we can't email them, I don't want to be the recipient, but email them all to Eric and then he can send them all to me. If we don't hear from you, we'll assume that you're happy with what's in there and we'll take everyone else's suggestions. I'm good with that. If you're good with that, we can get done earlier.
Carol, just want to make sure, just check it in. Anything else to add? Just want to make sure. Okay. Thank you very much. We move now to our final item, which is to speak a little bit about the budget process, which is going on right now. In your packet, it's page 73 is the beginning of the budget talk. You can see that we have the budget calendar in front of us. And it is the 23rd meeting right at the upper quarter of that 1/23/23 select board meeting, first budget draft, which is where we are. Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, I'll go through it briefly because there's a lot of information there.
Yeah.
What you have in front of you is exactly what was presented to the budget committee 2 weeks ago, and then has been modified based on their feedback. So the way the budget process works typically is that we have dual review, right? So the budget committee goes through and looks at the first set of departments, and then we can present that to the select board for discussion. These are the absolute finest detail pieces of the budget you will be looking at. One tool that I'm developing that you've seen in the past is the summary division level, department division level comparison that's done in Excel. And that will be, I hope, finished up for the budget committee tomorrow when we look at the second set of departments. But this is just a fine tool. A few things that I will note is that we have increasing costs in a number of areas. Just like everybody else, fuel prices, electricity prices, things that having to do with any kind of physical materials, those prices have gone up significantly, anywhere from 5 to 30, 40, 50% in some cases. Electricity and fuel are the two that are most impactful in the area, but also employee wages and then in turn benefits are having to increase in order to keep pace with inflation that we saw at the start of this year was around over 8%, 8.7. So we're budgeting less than that for employee increases by a small amount, but we are seeing big changes in a sizable chunk of our budget, especially in this first set of departments, which is administration, maintenance, some of the labor-heavy departments. So that's kind of where things are. I expect that we're going to continue to see increases in other departments and other areas. I don't know right now what the final tally is going to look like. I'll have a much better idea at the end of the week after our budget committee meeting. But I would say the board should expect, probably a minimum of 5% increase, and upwards of 8+, depending on how things go. I also expect that we'll see probably an 8 to 10% increase from the RSU, given that they actually dropped down the last couple of years, as did we, and everybody's starting to rise back up again. They also have a new contract negotiation going on, which is challenging and costly. So my summary on the budget is that we're doing the best we can, but there are some things that we're very hard up against. I think that we've done a very good job in the past 10 years being efficient and lean, and we've kept things to a bare minimum where we can. And now we're unfortunately in a place with the economy and inflation that our prices, our cost of services also have to go up. We are going to be having a very candid discussion about capital expenditures. We may be able to find some savings there, but we don't want to, cut expenses in areas like paving, where if we don't pay, the cost of doing it 5 years from now is twice what the cost is of doing it now. We have to be thoughtful of those kinds of things, but we are looking very, very closely, as we do every year, to make sure that that we're not overspending. I did request the budget committee and the individual committees. Everybody should be looking at reserves. We want to use reserves heavily if we can, because we have seen an increase in our reserve balances. That's a good thing. It helps us out when we face times like this. One thing I will say is that we don't want to dig too deep into those either, because if we pull away 10% of our reserves over the next 2 or 3 years, each year, that could put us in a position where we might be masking some of these increases. And then when we're down to a reserve balance that's no longer able to be dug into, then we're going to have a hard landing. So we want to be very thoughtful about that balancing and recognizing what we have, not going too far the other direction.
Yeah.
So
I also think this is the yearly time where I always say, thank goodness for the folks that are participating in the budget committee. That committee does incredible work. I know they've replaced some folks and they're continuing to look at it, but that sort of review and that kind of thoughtful going through the process, I think is very important. So I just, for what it's worth, on the record, adding it to the public record, thank you to everyone who is on the budget committee. Catherine.
Okay, so I have a couple questions. I'm gonna get them all out and then we'll answer them. So I already know the answer, but I'd like you to tell us what we're looking at for wage increase amount. And then I saw that legal went down from 50,000 to 25,000, and I would like to know if we really think that's realistic. And then in contract services, we have new expenses for information tech and software license support of 25,000, and I'd just like to know what that is for.
what was the last one again? The tech.
Yeah, it's
Tech
under
licenses.
administration and general government,
Okay, yeah, sure.
6,000 and 19,000. I'm just curious. I'm not like upset about it.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. So I'll start with those. The 19,000, if I remember correctly, is for our Trio licenses and software licensing. Trio is hugely expensive. It's a tremendous amount of money. We do have, I think, 6,000, if I'm looking at the right line, for tech support for our IT services.
Okay.
So
But we've been paying for Trio before, so are we just listing it in a different area now? Because this says we haven't spent anything on this for since 2020.
2024.
It's 0 all the way across. So it's listed as 100% change. So I'm just wondering.
I'll
if
have to
we
look at that. Can
reclassify
you give
that.
me the department, the 4-digit
it's-
code?
5024, so it's 1012, 5024, and 5025.
4, 25, yeah.
And I'm just thinking there's probably been a line somewhere for that.
Yeah, it might be that it just got moved. And actually that is right, because we did move this stuff around. After the budget committee discussion, we saw that it was terribly confusing around what was computer equipment, what was computer equipment maintenance, what was software purchases, what was other. So we've consolidated the software and software maintenance into one. the hardware purchases into another, so there has been some consolidation of lines.
Gotcha.
So I will, that's a good catch, and I will work on an
And
explanation.
some of that came from the audit, yes, some of that.
Some of it came from the audit, but really it was, it's been just a challenge of trying to explain how we're planning for and spending on our technology
Yeah.
in that area. Because we weren't, the budget wasn't necessarily built to make that easy to explain.
Yeah.
And we're hoping that these changes make it so.
Okay, I just found it. It's in contract services, 5025 went down $24,000. So you took it out of there and you put it in this new line.
And yeah.
So that's where that is.
So
Okay,
I will make sure we have a better explanation of that change. Which I hadn't really thought about because we just did it after the budget committee meeting. So,
Nice,
yeah, I'll make sure I explain that.
and the other one was legal, dropping it by half. Do we feel we're gonna be covered if we do that?
Yeah, so we have been increasing the budget for legal expenses in large part because of Bob Vitale's illegal activity. And we expect that probably is gonna continue. But we've built up a very healthy reserve of around $50,000 in legal expenses. So the purpose of this increase was to build up a kind of a reserve account so that if something happened that we had to spend money out of it, we wouldn't have to be having these wild fluctuations in what we're seeing the taxpayers have to pay for. So that if we do see a $20,000 expense because of something that happens, could be anything, that we can then pull out of the reserve to offset some of that and then raise the funds to replenish that over a more even time period.
So it seems like we have built up enough reserve that we feel comfortable reducing that line because of that surplus.
Yeah, it's not because we think that the legal peril has gone away.
Certainly not, yeah, absolutely.
Perfect, that's awesome.
And then the other one was
Yeah.
wages. So what we've done is 3 different areas. We'll start with stipends. Stipends, we are looking at a 10% increase. And this goes to Carol's point a few months ago about the animal control. We looked across the board and said that, well, stipends have not been adjusted for 5 years at least, probably in most cases. And so increasing those by 10% seemed like a reasonable way to acknowledge the changing costs of basically volunteering or doing stipended work for the town. And so we are looking at 10% for stipends. With regular hourly employees, we are looking at an 8% increase. And that would be to accommodate for basically inflation, which minimum wage went up 8.7% because that was the inflation that was seen as of January 1st of this year. So we're looking to accommodate for that. And as far as the contract employees, which are myself and Chip Stevens, it works out that we're budgeting for 5% for those contract employees. Chip is really more of a, he already had a $2 an hour scheduled increase as part of his contract that works out very close to 5%. And then I was just 5% because I'm a high paid employee. And it seemed like it would be a good idea to try to compress the wage scale so that 5% of what I make is more than 5% of what someone working at the transfer station would make. So we're trying to find some equity and be a little bit responsible in how those wages change and how that scale changes. So that's what I have for answer about the wage to be as direct as I can.
That's great, and I think that's really important for the public, because when they think about that the budget may go up anywhere from 5 to 8%, when you realize that minimum wage has gone up, so we therefore need to pay all of our employees more, it's understandable. It's probably not something we still really want to pay for, but at least you don't get really upset about it. It's not frivolous. You're paying people to have a living wage. And we've talked about this for years, retention of employees. You don't want to be the lowest paid town around, because then everyone will leave you and go to another town. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
thank you very much. great first go on the budget.
Yeah.
And we got our invite to the RSU budget discussion as well.
Yes.
And
15.
15,
15.
and I think that's in that schedule.
Yep, it is.
Of course, I have to flip.
6 P.M.
6:30. And so I guess I'll just wrap up again and say, that, this level of detail is a lot. And so moving forward, we will have accompanying these detailed reports. We will also have the summary, which will be reflecting the changes to date. And be kind of a rolling, instrument that we can use that is much more understandable, as far as, navigating budget.
So looking at the planning document, I like that we have the date set for the RSU budget meeting, and I love what you put in red. About 75% of tax bills is education spending.
Yeah.
Just so we know what we're voting on when we vote for town budget.
So
I have a
Eric,
couple questions. Go ahead, Sean.
So the joint select board meeting where we're gonna talk about that capital plan, can we get that like more than 3 days before that meeting, or is that, I know we're in this really super tight turnaround time.
Yeah,
I just,
That's next week, so you're asking for it by Friday.
well, I mean, I've got a budget meeting tomorrow night, type time frame.
right,
So Thursday and Friday, we'll have it. So I will try very, very hard to have it Thursday. But I will certainly have it by Friday. I might be working in a nice quiet office on Thursday.
I think it probably will
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. Carol, you can go ahead if you have a couple questions.
I do. First of all, I know on the schedule it had like Department 2 and Department 3, and cemeteries is listed on both, and I'm just wondering what part of the cemetery budget is in, like, maybe does it have to do with roads or something in one of them and something else in the other? I just wanted to
That's
understand.
probably a typo, Carol. I will correct that.
Okay.
I don't see it listed in 2.
So like in 2 under capital improvements, and
Yeah.
then in 3 it's bolded. So is it
So
under
yeah,
Department
so,
3
I
then?
see.
So it will be both.
Yeah, so we do talk about cemeteries are one of the areas, and actually that capital improvements list should be updated. It's not entirely accurate. But we do budget every year for capital reserves for the cemetery. So I guess in that respect, yes, it is included in both places. But it's a good point, because I will look at that capital planning list, because that really should be either expanded or a bit more description about what it means, because some of those items actually, I think, aren't gonna be discussed, like the Running Hook Lake Dam. We don't, at least for the next 25 years, have any plans on investing capital in that after the, what we spent 5 years ago.
Okay. And then are the budget meetings Zoomed? I wanted to be a little more aware this year of the process because I was not so last year. And I'm away. Are they able to be listened to?
Yes, they are. We've been trying to get that capacity up. They actually, if you go to the budget committee website, there should be a link to an agenda. I think that actually, given the issues we've had the last 2 days with snow, that budget agenda isn't up there yet, but I will make sure that's up tomorrow morning first thing. And that will include the Zoom link.
Thank you. And then lastly, sorry?
No, we don't currently record those.
So you
I'm
have to
sorry?
listen live. You have to listen live. They're not.
Oh, of
recorded.
course. Yeah, but it's Zoomable.
It's Zoomable, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, and then lastly, I mean, I've worked for companies at good increases at 2%. I'm not, it's foreign to me to do 8%, 10%, 5%. And we did have, the employees had an increase with the ARPA funds, which I thought fit less appropriately there and more appropriately during the budget talk. And I thought like a flat rate on employees was a little bit weird in that the people with us the longest got the smallest percentage by doing like a $2 flat increase, which maybe those are the people that are the most we might be concerned about retaining. So I guess I'm wondering, in addition to the one they got earlier this year with the ARPA, is that taken into consideration with the hourly? Because I think at the time I was mentioning that's more appropriate during budget talks, and they've already had a bit of a increase, but I don't know how much out of whack we are versus like surrounding municipalities.
Yeah, well, good questions all around. So yes, we did consider the increases that happened a year ago or thereabouts. And those really were just keeping pace with what was happening at the time. And I 100% agree. When I used the budget for towns, when I was working on the islands, we budget 2.5%, 3%, because that's what inflation was. We are in unprecedented times with the cost of living increases. And so I would say that we are seeing unprecedented increases, but what we're not seeing is a real change in policy. I think that the policy of the town of Readfield has been to maintain the level of income that supports, as someone mentioned, a standard of living or whatever it is. But if we don't adjust what people are making in relation to what things cost, then we're actually paying them less. So if inflation is 10% and we're only giving people a 2% increase, what they have coming in is not going to be enough to cover what they have going out. And you mentioned that earlier. So all we're really trying to do is be equitable and make sure that our employees are not, aren't ending up behind the curve and wanting to go someplace else because they can make more money or make a living wage elsewhere. I saw an article, I can't remember where it was, Walmart minimum wage nationwide, $14 an hour. We're seeing extraordinary price and wage inflation on the low end of the pay scale, and that is reflected upwards. That was actually, I think, one of the main points in the governor and the legislature's plan when they put in these automatic minimum wage increases. Because what happened was, we've seen a tremendous increase on the low end of the scale, and that's really pushed up wages, throughout. I have to make sure that you mentioned people that have been here for a long time. I have, transportation employees that have been here for 15 years almost. And they are right now just a couple dollars above minimum wage. And even with this increase, they'll still be not that far off. And so the whole idea around this wage structure is just to respond to what we're seeing in the environment and in the economy. I don't like these numbers, they scare me. They're big numbers. But I also don't see any way to be fair to our employees and ultimately fair to the public who benefit from these services if we don't keep on pace with those. So.
Okay, I appreciate the explanation on that. I think was important to hear, and it is unprecedented times. I did not bring up the animal control to raise everybody's stipend. I was shocked we even got something as a volunteer. I'm not sure that's warranted for an increase on stipends, but the reason I brought up animal control is I think that was just totally out of whack for the time involved, the hours that are involved, use of personal automobiles and risks and stuff like that. So we can discuss that during the budget thing, but I didn't want that to leak over into anybody else's. It was just kind of a standalone issue.
Sure, yeah, well, I appreciate that.
In what department is that discussed, Eric?
That's administration or community services, so that's coming up next. But I will say, Carol,
Right.
I did look at the wages or the stipend relative to the 6 months of history I got for activity. And I guess I don't want to get into details, but I will say I think it's more than fair, given the hours that are worked and the time commitment and the equipment that's required, including use of the personal vehicle.
And that Department 3 is scheduled for February 15th, Carol.
I've got it on my calendar. Thank you.
Right. Well, friends, thank you very much for that explanation for our first draft of the budget. Thank you again to the Budget Committee and everyone who was involved in that. If there's no further discussion about the budget or anything like that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn.
Let Steve have a second.
All in favor? All in favor? Good. And Carol, thank you in the affirmative. Well, thank you very much, Carol, for zooming in. We appreciate that. Thank you to everyone else who was a part of this meeting. We would like to say thank you and we're adjourned.